Alright, for some this is going to be a bit of a dry video, but bear with us, it is important. Now, safety is paramount in any workshop, but especially so when you're working around a welder. In a regular wood shop, you've got airborne dust particles, you've got blades that can cut your fingers off, and you've got nails and other bits of metal that can puncture your feet. Now, you throw a welder into the mix and you've got all of that, plus molten metal and sparks. You can set fire to your workshop. You need to be safe when working with a welder. So if you're interested in metalworking in any degree and looking at getting yourself a welder, do your eyes, ears, lungs and skin a favor. Watch this video all the way to the end.
Before we start any welding, we need to consider safety. One of the important things is keeping covered, as welding arc gives off a lot of ultraviolet light and can cause severe burns, so long sleeve shirts, long pants are required. And you also may consider, because of the hot sparks and spatter caused by different types of welding, particularly in positional welds, wearing a leather jacket over the top. This will protect you from the ultraviolet, but it also protects you from falling hot metal. So something else that should be considered. The next item that's necessary when you're welding is gloves to protect your hands. We start off with a couple of types of gloves that are not really suitable. So these are carpenter's gloves, and these are a type of rigger's gloves. They do give good feel, etc., but they have a lot of synthetic on them. If you get metal weld spatter on the synthetic, it will melt, and it can melt into your skin and cause quite nasty burns. So they're not recommended for welding. Also, the carpenter's gloves have exposed fingers, not good around hot metal. Then there are rigger's gloves. They're completely leather, so they're quite okay for tacking. They are thin, so they won't handle a lot of heat, but they do give you a bit more feel for when you're setting up. So if you're setting up a weld and tacking, then they're probably not too bad. But they only come to the wrists, and as you'll notice, the sleeves have a gap. You can get arc burn there, so they're not really good for full-time welding. So then we come to proper welding gloves. Very heavy leather, there's not a lot of feel to them, but they do protect your hands well. They will protect your hands from heat, and they'll handle heat from hot metal better. They also are gauntlets, so they come a long way up your arms. They cover these holes in your sleeves and generally protect you from ultraviolet as well as hot metal.
You can also get TIG gloves, which are a lot like the full welding gauntlets. They come all the way down the arm. They are, however, a lot thinner, so they give you a lot more feel while you're trying to TIG weld, as it's a more in-touch welding method. The only downside of that is they are quite thin, so if you touch anything hot, you'll know about it really quick. And they're not very good for MIG welding because, again, they don't resist heat, so they will wear through quite quickly.
Another important safety feature that you need is eye protection while you're welding and before and after. So we should cover off. It's always advisable in a workshop to wear safety glasses, Australian standard approved. Safety glasses will prevent you getting dust and foreign bodies in your eyes from grinding. Not only that, polycarbonate lenses do actually help absorb a lot of the ultraviolet light, and it will help you if someone strikes an arc and you're not aware. You'll be less likely to get arc flash than if you're wearing no glasses at all. So they're definitely better than nothing that way. There are also prescription safety glasses which you can get. Again, polycarbonate lenses for impact, and they will help absorb the ultraviolet light. So they're for old people like me whose eyes are going after doing lots of welding. So they're available if needed. The next thing that we need to talk about is welding helmets. Now, there are a variety of welding helmets. There are fixed welding helmets, there are flip front welding helmets, and then the common type that we find today is the auto darkening welding helmet. The fixed and the flip front welding helmets have a lot of drawbacks in that you can't see what you're doing until you actually strike the arc. So they're dark all the time. The other thing is that they're a fixed shade. if you're going to be doing different jobs, you have to keep changing the shade of the lens to suit the application, from shade 9 through up to shade 14 or 15 for extreme welding. But the higher the amperage, the higher the shade needs to be to protect your eyes from the arc. The good thing with the auto darkening helmet is most of them will have a shade selector on the side. This one runs from shade 9 up to shade 13. They do also have an off position which can use them for grinding. If you try using them with grinding while they're on, the sparks will actually activate the lenses and they will go dark. So the lens usually is powered from your welding arc via a solar panel. As soon as the helmet detects a welding arc, within less than 1,000th of a second, they will go dark to protect your eyes, and then you'll have the shade selected for while you're welding. There's two other controls inside the helmet that are important. One is, we'll get a close-up of that. One is sensitivity, and the sensitivity is for if you're welding outside in the sunlight, you turn the sensitivity down because the sun will actually activate the lens. But you should have the sensitivity as high as possible so the slightest arc will activate the lens. The other is a delay. Now that doesn't delay at the start, that delays at the finish of welding. So when you stop welding, the lens will stay dark for a period afterwards to allow for the weld pool cooling out, as the weld pool is still quite bright until it cools down. So the bigger the weld pool, the longer you need to delay to keep the shade in place so that you don't get a bright spot in front of your eyes from the actual weld pool. So while we're talking about welding helmets, one other option that you can use to protect yourself is a skull cap, or something to go over your head to stop the spatter burning holes in the top of your head.
This is a synthetic neck sock. You can, or you should never use it. It's mostly synthetic. It will cover your scalp and stop spatter, but then the spatter turns this into molten plastic and will burn that into your scalp, so that's never a good idea. This is what I use. It's just a leather biker's do-rag. It's enough to keep the spatter out of your hair, off your ears, and partially off the back of your neck, but it still doesn't provide full coverage, but it does stop you doing a little dance when you get hot spatter on your head. And the best option is a 100% cotton welder's hood.
Yep.
We pull that over your head, it covers your scalp, it covers your ears, it covers your neck. It's a good way to stop getting stray arc burn as well, but it does have to be 100% cotton so that when hot spatter hits it, it catches fire, it doesn't melt. So you've got a chance to get it off your head before damage is done.
Yeah, usually you stay away from all synthetics when you're welding. Everything should be cotton or wool or a blend of the two, particularly your socks. If you go wearing any socks with a partial synthetic mix, if you get spattered or a blob of hot metal down into your boot, it will melt the synthetic into a plastic and melt it into your skin and leave a nasty burn, which I found out very early on in my welding career. So never weld with anything synthetic on, always wool or cotton, natural blends.
I need to change my socks.
Further to safety, you need to be considering welding fumes. Welding fumes can be a problem. You don't want to be breathing those in. Unfortunately, if you thinking about using a normal respirator, these things are far too large to fit underneath a welding helmet. But they do take out a lot of the nasties out of the air. There are welders' disposable respirators. These are impregnated with activated carbon, so they do take the particles out of the air. They also take out some of the more dangerous fumes that may be in welding fume. So they're a great idea. The other thing is they're low profile and they fit neatly behind your welding mask. So a great option. They are more expensive than other disposable respirators, but well worth the investment, particularly if you're welding, say, anything with zinc or galvanizing on it, where you can get metal fume fever from the zinc fumes coming off.
Something to note about those masks though is you do need to keep them in a sealed container. Otherwise, they'll just suck up all the nasties from the air while you've got them sitting on the shelf, and then when it comes time to actually use them for welding, they don't work properly, and you end up getting metal fume fever anyway.
In the welding environment, it's very noisy usually. There's grinders working, preparing metal for welding. There's a lot of banging and hammering, getting things in position for welding. There's also grinders used in cleanup. So the welding environment is very noisy. One of the other things that people don't think of often is that the MIG welding arc in short arc transfer is actually quite noisy. It can get up to around 100 decibels, which over a period of time will affect your hearing. So most people consider earmuffs. You've probably all seen these. They're quite effective. They have a good seal. For those people who don't like things inside their ears, they're probably quite good. The problem with earmuffs, in whatever style you happen to pick, is that they generally don't work well with a welding helmet because they're too bulky and don't fit in. So, as you can see, they don't work. So earplugs are the next best option. Earplugs such as these are worn inside the ear, so therefore there's nothing to get in the way of your welding helmet, and they will provide very good protection against noise. If you're using earplugs, there's a very important thing to know about them. They're made of sponge rubber or foam rubber. The reason for that is the little air cells inside provide the noise insulation. They also provide the method of expanding to fill your ear and give you a proper seal. So the right way to use a earplug is to roll it down so it's nice and thin, squeeze all the air out of those air cells, or compress the air in those air cells. Then reach over your head with your hand, pull the top of your ear up, that straightens the ear canal. Then you can insert the earplug and you can feel it start to expand as soon as it gets inside. The body heat actually expands the air cells inside the foam and gives you a good seal. Great, they work really well. Probably the only problem you're going to come across is that you find it hard to hear people when you've got them in. But some people don't like things in their ears, in which case they have to revert to the earmuffs. Having a safe work environment is very important, so you need to follow some safe work methods when you're welding. One of the things that you probably should do if you're in an area with other people is announce before you strike an arc. This is usually done by yelling out "eyes," and that alerts everyone to the fact that you're about to strike an arc, and they can look away or take precautions by putting on a welding helmet or whatever. If possible, you should surround yourself with welding curtains and have no one else working with you, but that's not always practical, and sometimes you'll be working with other welders, so announcing the arc is an important thing to do. Another thing that needs to be considered is what flammable items are around. If there are any flammable items in the area where you have to weld, if you can remove them, that's the best thing. If you can't remove them, then you need to take precautions. They either need to be damped down, or they need to be covered with something like a welding blanket or something similar to stop hot metal and sparks getting to them and setting them on fire. So cover any items if you can't damp them down. Damp down wherever possible, bearing in mind that there is electricity around, so you may need to be careful with that. Another thing that you should have on hand if there are flammable items is firefighting equipment. Now, it can be as simple as a garden hose, can be fire extinguishers. Bigger ones than this probably would be good. But the fire extinguishers should suit whatever flammable item is in your area, and you should only be using water if the flammable item is something that can be doused with water safely.
Something to be considered when using water though is that welders use electricity to create hot molten metal. So if you do use water, just be careful that you may end up electrifying your entire work area if you somehow manage to complete the circuit between the torch and the earth.
So another thing is that when you're welding, you create large lumps of hot metal. This hot metal stays hot for quite some time. Some people can, if there are other people working in your work area, they can touch things that they don't realise are hot and get severe burns. So it's always a good idea to label your hot items with hot in big letters and then write the time and date so that people can look at it and say, well, it was half an hour ago, it's probably cooled off, and they'll still be cautious when they go to touch it rather than just trying to pick something up that could be very hot.
And even if they do go and pick something up that's labelled hot, it takes any liability off your shoulders for their stupidity. So there's that.
Another thing to think about when you're grinding or when you're welding is where your sparks are going. So don't direct your sparks toward flammable items, don't direct your sparks towards other people. Be especially careful if you're welding above other people, because there will be globs of hot metal falling down, and precautions should be taken if that's the case. So now we've covered off safety, we thought we'd just run a simple weld with a stick electrode and just cover off how to set up a machine. So we have a multi-process machine here. This one's capable of MIG welding, DC TIG welding, and manual metal arc or stick welding. So to do that, there's a button control on the front of this, and we just run through until we highlight the stick welding section.
Done.
So we need to plug in a work return lead, or an earth lead as it used to be called. These have a twist lock fitting on the front. If you just put the twist lock in and twist it, it will actually spring back the way it came and undo itself, and then you get a loose connection and it starts to heat up and arc, and it can actually damage the connectors. So the trick with the work return lead, or with these twist lock holders, is to wind them up so they actually have tension in them. Put them into the hole and they will actually lock themselves in then and stay tight. So this lead is used for putting the power through to the MIG part of the process, which we're not using, so we'll leave that one there. We're going to run DC electrode positive, so we will be plugging the manual metal arc electrode holder into the positive terminal on the machine. Again, we wind up the twist selector, insert it, and it locks itself into place and doesn't try and undo itself. So now we're just going to grab a piece of scrap metal just for a practice run.
This is actually the piece of scrap metal that I learned to weld on. So there's a legacy item.
Yeah. So we've got some 2mm general purpose welding electrodes. They're a 4112 designation, E4112. We'll go into that more on another video about how electrodes are numbered. But this is just general purpose, all positional electrode in 2mm. Now, when you're starting out using these electrodes, the box or the packet will always have a guide on it. If you look here, 2mm size, current rating 40 to 70 amps. So just for today, we'll dial up approximately 50 to 60 amps on the dial. That should be mid-range for this electrode. And the work return lead has been fitted to the welding bench's earth clamp. So remember, the electrode is live all of the time when you're manual metal arc welding, so don't let it touch the bench. We're using a twist lock electrode holder, so you just screw it up and it clamps onto the electrode and holds it securely so that we get good electrical contact. Now, I just grab a welding helmet. Make sure your helmet's turned on if it has a grinding position. You probably only need 9 or 10 shade for this electrode, and it's a very small electrode. And we'll just do what's known as a pad weld, which is just a straight weld on a piece of plate. Pad welds are used to build up material so that it can be machined off if it's been reconditioned. So it's a very simple weld, and one of the first ones that we start learning when we're learning how to weld. You want to step back? Okay. Eyes. Useful item when you're stick welding is a chipping hammer for removing the slag. Slag can fly off, so just make sure you're wearing safety glasses or some sort of face protection. And usually, if you've laid your weld down properly, the slag should detach easily without a problem.
That's all we're going to be covering in this video. I know the safety drags on for a while, but it is important, and stick welding, as simple as it is, still deserves its own entire video. However, that being said, I will be skipping stick on the next video, and we'll be going straight to MIG welding and MIG setup. It's a much more common form of welding, much more useful form of welding, and if you're looking at getting into being a metalworker or welder, it's what you will be using most of the time. Manual metal arc has its place, MIG is just better. Anyway, it would be much appreciated if you could leave some feedback on this video. We want to put more of these out. We would like to refine them. Please hit that subscribe button if you've liked it, as well as, maybe the like button. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not your dad. But until the next video, peace.